Testing. 1, 2. Testing. Sheila, sweetie, I'll put it in a Tupperware when I get home. Yeah, it'll stay. For Christ's sakes, it's a casserole, Sheila! It'll stay! Oh, hey guys. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very interesting one, as they all are, in my opinion. But this one holds a special place in my corazon, which is heart in Spanish, for those of you who aren't adept to the lingo. Miguel Serrano, Chilean diplomat, occultist, and poet. One of my teachers along my path, along with Carl Jung and Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse and Carl Jung have been a huge part of my life, and many others in the exploration of the inner self and working through the demons we've acquired throughout the years, our negative thought forms, and integrating our negative sides into our beings in order to attain sort of a Sonnenmenschian, Ubermenschian quality. There seems to be some sort of revisiting and newfound interest in Nazism, occultism, what it really meant in those times. Did the propaganda throughout the ages and the victors of the wars write the history in ways that didn't really explain the whole truth behind things? Why was Germany such a standalone force that took on almost single-handedly multiple countries at once? How is that possible? Where's the spiritual tie in that? And why are South Americans on board with Nazi occultism, or as Serrano likes to term it, esoteric Hitlerism? Before we get into Serrano's background and what he's all about further, I just wanted to go into what esoteric neo-Nazism, Nazism, also known as esoteric Nazism, esoteric fascism, or esoteric Hitlerism, represents a fusion of Nazi ideology with mystical, occult, and esoteric traditions. This belief system emerged in the aftermath of World War II as adherents sought to reinterpret and adapt the ideas of the Third Reich within the context of a new religious movement. Esoteric Nazism is characterized by its emphasis on the mythical and spiritual dimensions of Aryan supremacy, drawing from a range of sources including theosophy, anosophy, and Gnostic dualism. These beliefs have evolved into a complex and often contradictory body of thought that seems to justify and perpetuate racist and supremacist ideologies under the guise of spiritual enlightenment. The roots of esoteric Nazism can be traced back to early 20th century occult movements and figures who sought to combine racial theories with mysticism. Key figures such as Guido von List and Jorg Lanz von Liebenfels played significant roles in this development, with their ideas laying the groundwork for what would later become the esoteric underpinnings of Nazi ideology. These early esotericists promoted the idea of an ancient Aryan race endowed with divine qualities, which they believed was destined to rule over the races. This notion of Aryan supremacy was further developed by the Thule Society, which is where the Vril energy comes from, which I'm going to get into later with Robert Sepper's studies, Atlantean Gardens, who wrote a book called The Occult Secrets of Vril, which I actually have a copy of, and it's very interesting. But I'll go into that, which delves into the Thule Society and how they had all these hot babes channeling for the Nazis, supposedly. The Thule Society here is said to be an occult group that heavily influenced the early Nazi movement, blending nationalism with mystical beliefs in with a mythical Aryan homeland known as Hyperborea. And I'm probably going to make a separate video on Hyperborea itself, but this goes way before the distortion of this sort of ancient knowledge by the Nazis, in my opinion. I feel like it was heavily distorted. They were trying to reverse the wheel and go back to some sort of ancient ideal, which can't be done at this time, and it's not meant to be done on this physical earth, in my opinion. It's a spiritual spiritual undertaking, which I feel Miguel Serrano understood, and so did Hermann Hesse and Carl Jung, which is why they all kind of remained in the back. I mean, Serrano became a diplomat; he couldn't really be in the background, but Hess and Jung kind of retreated and retired into themselves. But they felt in touch with this Hyperborean ideal as well, and this kind of golden hermetic circle, which I'll also get into later. After the fall of the Third Reich, esoteric Nazism evolved and adapted to new contexts, with figures such as Savitri Devi, who was a white woman who became like this spiritual figure in India, and she's supposedly pro Hitler as well, which is interesting and a separate kind of subject on its own. And Miguel Serrano emerging as prominent proponents of what is now referred to as esoteric Hitlerism. These post war esotericists expanded on the idea of Hitler as a messianic figure, often deifying him as an avatar of divine forces. Savitri Devi, for example, integrated Nazi ideology with Hinduism, portraying Hitler as the ninth avatar of Vishnu and aligning Aryan supremacy with Hindu concepts of cosmic order. Similarly, Miguel Serrano introduced extraterrestrial elements into esoteric Hitlerism, claiming that the Aryan race had divine origins linked to a race of godlike beings from Hyperborea. Esoteric Nazism has continued to influence various neo-Nazi and far-right groups on the post-war era, often merging with other esoteric and occult traditions. The concept of a collective Aryan unconscious, inspired by Carl Jung's theories, and the symbol of the black sun, representing hidden esoteric power, are central to these beliefs. These ideas have been perpetuated through various means, including literature, music, and digital media, contributing to the persistence of esoteric Nazism in contemporary culture. Despite its fringe status, esoteric Nazism remains a potent force within certain extremist circles, offering a mystical justification for racial and ideological supremacy. And here's where it gets dicey, folks, because what they're seeming to do here is kind of like merging their ideals with already established cultures and religions, which does seem quite deceptive. But in another lens, their mission could be to reunify what was separated in the beginning. So instead of seeing it as like an infiltration, we can view it as a reunification. Because if Savitri Devi were doing something bad over in India, if that they wouldn't accept her as the kind of like queen like figure that she was. But where I draw kind of a line is accepting that Hitler was some sort of messianic avatar figure. But it blows my mind that people so spiritually adept and far along in their journeys can agree to such a thing. Jung had an interesting view on it, saying that Hitler was basically possessed by the sojourning spirit, the hunting, the spirit of the West that they referred to as Wotan. And that's supposedly why it had such force and power, because he was sort of channeling this primal deity that brings rebellion and disorder and whatnot, which was an interesting take on it. But it's probably going to be impossible to truly know the truth behind all of that. But it's very interesting to think about, no? A question that's been in my mind since I first stumbled across Serrano through Hess and Jung, namely the book Jung and Hess, A Tale of Two Friendships, which Serrano wrote about his encounters with both of them and how they were all involved in some hermetic circle that Hess coined, that you could be separated by space and time, but there's always a link through the hermetic circle which can't be broken. It's sealed. and that's like a circle of brotherhood, brothers along the journey of self-discovery and truth and all that jazz. But why South America? It's like why did the post-war Nazis seek refuge in South America as well as North America? Was it perhaps because there were many there that shared the same spiritual ideals throughout the war and throughout all of the chaos going on to to deceive the public and to deceive everybody into killing each other? In the immediate aftermath of World War II and the defeat of fascism, as many as 9,000 Nazis and other fascists escaped Europe to South America via rat lines, including Croats, which is Croatians, Ukrainians, Russians, and other Europeans who aided the Nazi war machine. Most, perhaps as many as 5,000, went to Argentina. Between 1,500 and 2,000 may have made it to Brazil, around 500 to 1,000 to Chile, and the rest to Paraguay and Uruguay. The rat lines were supported by rogue elements in the Vatican, particularly an Austrian bishop and 4 Croatian clergy of the Catholic Church who sympathized with the Ustaše, which was a Croatian fascist and ultranationalist organization active between 1929 and 1945, which was a Croatian revolutionary movement. Argentina was a favored destination because of its large German population and the support of the government of Juan Domingo Perón, which I'll get into Mr. Perón, whose wife Isabel Perón is documented in Robert Sepper's book that I'm going to bring up. Starting in 1947, U.S. intelligence utilized existing rat lines to move certain Nazi strategists and scientists. In some cases, the U.S. was complicit in the exodus of Nazi war criminals to South America following the war. The U.S. Counterintelligence Corps recruited Klaus Barbie, the Gestapo chief in Lyon, France, who played a role in the deaths of thousands of French Jews and members of the French resistance, as an agent to assist with anti-communist efforts. He was smuggled to Bolivia, where he continued his spy work and instructed the military regime on how to torture and interrogate political opponents. Many of the Nazis who escaped to South America were never brought to justice. SS Colonel Walter Rauff, who created mobile gas chambers that killed at least 100,000 people, died in Chile in 1984. Edward Rashman, the Butcher of Riga, died in Paraguay in 1977. Gustav Wagner, an SS officer known as the Beast, died in Brazil in 1980 after the country's Supreme Federal Court refused to extradite him to Germany because of inaccuracies in the paperwork. Prominent Nazis Adolf Eichmann and Joseph Mengele were able to flee to Argentina from Europe. Both lived undetected for years, with Mengele dying in Brazil. Israeli intelligence tracked down Eichmann, living under an assumed name, and abducted and brought him to Israel to stand trial. He was executed. Eventually, collaboration between the government and the Simon Wiesenthal Center led to the arrest of other notorious war criminals such as Priebke and Kutschmann. So you see, this is one big old mess, folks. We have our own country funneling and redistributing these Nazis around the world so that they can avoid harm and persecution. This has put a name on the esoteric end of all of this, which I feel Miguel Serrano had his true faith in, and it is very well that he could have been deceived and that he was told that this Messiah would be brought about, and everybody was just looking for somebody who it could be. And I'm sure Hitler was more than happy to lean into that role. So we have to look twice whenever there's one man that we think is going to save us all. And before we get into even further, let's go into Miguel Serrano's background. Born Miguel Joaquin Diego del Carmen Serrano Fernandez, was born on the 10th of September 1917, died 28th of February 2009, was a Chilean diplomat, writer, neo-pagan occultist, defender of a doctrine that supposedly would be true Christianity, the Christianism with a K, and fascist activist. A Nazi sympathizer in the late 1930s and early 1940s, he later became a prominent figure in the neo-Nazi movement as an exponent of esoteric Hitlerism, which we've gone over already. Born to a wealthy Chilean family of European descent. That sentence alone says a lot. Serrano was orphaned as a child and raised by his grandmother. After an education at the Internado Nacional Barros Arana, he developed an interest in writing and far-right politics, allying himself with the National Socialist Movement of Chile. During the Second World War, in which Chile remained neutral until 1943, Serrano campaigned in support of Nazi Germany and, and promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories through his own fortnightly publication, La Nueva Edad, which is the New Age in Spanish. In 1942, he joined an occult order founded by a German immigrant, which combined pro-Nazi sentiment with ceremonial magic and Kundalini yoga. So let's pause right here. This is probably where all of this idealism was born in his mind. And as a child, if you don't have parents, orphaned by your grandmother, these people become your new parents, your brothers, and so you rely heavily on them and confide and trust heavily in these people. It presented the Nazi German leader Adolf Hitler as a spiritual adept who had incarnated to Earth as a savior of the Aryan race and who would lead humanity out of a dark age known as the Kali Yuga. Serrano became convinced that Hitler had not died in 1945, but had secretly survived and was living in Antarctica. After visiting Antarctica, Serrano traveled to Germany and then Switzerland, where he met novelist Hermann Hesse and psychoanalyst Carl Jung. In 1965, he published a reminiscence of his time with the pair, which is The Tale of Two Friends, which I mentioned earlier. In 1953, Serrano joined the Chilean diplomatic corps and was stationed in India until 1963, where he took a keen interest in Hinduism and wrote several books. He was later made ambassador to Yugoslavia and then Austria, and while in Europe, made contacts with various former Nazis and other far-rightists living on the continent. Following Chile's election of a Marxist president, Salvador Allende, Serrano was dismissed from the diplomatic service in 1970. After Allende was ousted in a coup and Augusto Pinochet took power, Serrano returned to Chile in 1973. He became a prominent organizer in Chilean neo-Nazi movement, holding annual celebration of Hitler's birthday, organizing a neo-Nazi rally in Santiago, and producing a neo-Nazi political manifesto. He wrote a trilogy of books on Hitler in which he outlined his view of the Nazi leader as an avatar. He remained in contact with neo-Nazis elsewhere in the world and gave interviews to various foreign far-right publications. Later in his life, between his Nazism and occultism days, which was roughly between 1939 and 1952, Serrano had initially shown little interest in Nazi attitudes towards Jewish people. He became increasingly interested in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jews manipulating world events. Which, come on. Two Chilean artists gave him a Spanish language translation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a text purporting to expose this alleged international Jewish conspiracy. And there's a lot of talk on this text, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which has been called a forgery, a propagandic text to incite some sort of argument amongst, the lower folk and cause, people to just antagonize each other. There's rumor that it doesn't really expose much, of what the true intentions are. It's just kind of like what people want to hear type of thing, but I don't know the truth about it. According to the historian Nicholas Goodrick Clark, it was this discovery of the protocols which marked a crucial point in the development of Serrano's Nazism. From November 1941, he began printing excerpts from the protocols in La Nueva Edad. So Serrano did use text from his protocols in his little newspaper called The New Age. So it could have been that he was actually influenced by this text, or it could just be hearsay and people are just trying to kind of blend him in with the fools. Serrano also developed an interest in forms of religious or spiritual practice, including both Western esotericism and Hinduism. In late 1941, Gaia suggested that Serrano could support the German and Italian war effort not just through his publications, but also on the etheric inner planes, introducing him to an esoteric order sympathetic to Nazism. Serrano later claimed that this order had been founded near the start of the 20th century by a German migrant known as F.K. Serrano was initiated into the group in February 1942. This F.K. claimed that the group owed its allegiance to a secretive Brahmin elite who resided in the Himalayas. It practiced combined Kundalini yoga with ceremonial magic and expressed a pro-Nazi position. It espoused a belief in an astral body which would be awakened through various rituals and meditative practices. The group revered the Nazi German leader Adolf Hitler as the savior of an Aryan race and presented him as Shudibushvadhaba, an initiate of immense willpower who had voluntarily incarnated on the earth to assist in the overthrow of the Kali Yuga, a present dark age for humanity. And that long word I just butchered is another, bodhisattva is another word, like an avatar. FK claimed that through the astral realm, he was able to establish a connection with Hitler, during which they had various conversations. As the Second World War ended in defeat for Nazi Germany in 1945, Serrano was convinced that Hitler had not committed suicide in Berlin, as was claimed by the victorious Allies. Instead, Serrano believed that Hitler had escaped and was living in Antarctica, either in a secluded, warm environment on the continent or under the ice cap itself. This idea had been suggested to him by FK, who claimed that he remained in astral contact with Hitler, but was also widely rumored in the Latin American press. In 1947, Ladislao Szabo's book, Hitler Est Vivo, had been published, exerting an influence on Serrano. Szabo's book alleged that a U-boat convoy had taken Hitler to safety in Queen Maud Land. And Queen Maud Land is a roughly 2.7 million square kilometer region of Antarctica claimed by Norway as a dependent territory. It borders the claimed British Antarctic Territory. In 1947, Serrano traveled to Antarctica as a journalist with the Chilean army. In 1948, he wrote his own short book, La Antártica y Otros Mitos, which is the Antarctic and Other Myths, which repeated Szabo's claims about Hitler's survival. And let's just take a brief aside to the Thule Society and Robert Sepper's book, The Occult Secrets of Vril, because this has a tie into the Thule Society mentioned earlier, which is part of this whole esoteric Nazism, Hitlerism, and a lot of the occult rings of the Reich claim to have had these long blonde-haired mediums who had the ability to connect with other spiritual realms. And so this comes from chapter 3 of Robert Sepper's book. Behind all these mysteries was an even deeper element, a secret order known to the initiates as the Order of the Black Sun. This organization was so feared that it is now illegal to even print their symbols and insignia in modern Germany. Its roots stem from the Vril Society, that began around the same time as the Thule Society, when Karl Haushofer founded the Bruder der Lichts, which means Brothers of Light, sometimes referred to as the Luminous Lodge. Whereas the Thule Society ended up focusing primarily upon materialistic and political agendas, the Vril Society put its attention on more metaphysical matters. This group was eventually renamed the Vril Gesellschaft as it rose in prominence and united three major societies: the Lords of the Black Stone, which was the Teutonic Order, the Black Knights of the Thule Society, and the Black Sun, which was the elite branch of the SS. When the German secret societies came into being after World War I, the world's leading authorities on archaeology and linguistics, especially regarding ancient Sumer and Babylon, were primarily German. A medium named Maria Orsic began getting messages in an unknown language and couldn't transcribe them, so began meeting with key members of these societies, along with other mediums. The messages supposedly came from the star system of Aldebaran, an orange giant located about 65 light years away in the zodiac constellation of Taurus, which they believed has two planets and were said to exist two classes of people: the Aryan or original pure race, and a subservient race which had devolved or developed in a negative fashion as a result of mutation from climatic changes likely due to nuclear fallout. From Peter Moon's book, The Black Sun, a half-billion years ago, the Aryan, Elohim or elder race, began to colonize our solar system as Aldebarans became uninhabitable. Marduk, existing in what is today the asteroid belt, was the first to be colonized, which was then Mars. When they came to Earth, these Aryans were known as the Sumerians. So this takes a whole different, I mean, this book is amazing. Check it out, give it a read. But it takes a whole different look at the ancient stories, the myths, you know. I still am on the fence about if they actually come from different star systems or if this is just like a different realm of consciousness or something. But the Nazi regime did use these mediums and had great faith in them, and they did seem to know what was going on more than a lot of other people did. And German engineering, we all know it's A1, ahead of its time. Where did they get these secrets of electrogravitic technology? And a lot of people say it's these mediums and this kind of spiritual communication and the ancient roots tied to Hyperborea, Aldebaran, what have you. And within the same book, on chapter 5, Robert Sepper brings the Antarctica tie, where Admiral Byrd in Operation High Jump, where his whole fleet went down to Antarctica and were like demolished by Nazi UFOs and craft, and were just completely outgunned, and they just completely covered that story up. It is a historical fact that Nazi Germany devoted significant resources to the exploration of Antarctica and established a pre-war presence there with its first mission in the Antarctic summer of 1938-1939. According to a statement by Grand Admiral Dönitz in 1943, the German submarine fleet is proud of having built for the Führer in another part of the world a Shangri-La land, an impregnable fortress. If the fortress was in Antarctica, was it built by the Nazis or discovered there? After the defeat of Nazi Germany, according to various sources, elite Nazi scientists and leaders escaped to this impregnable fortress by U-boats, which are submarines, two of which experienced difficulties and surrendered in Argentina. In countless biographies of Adolf Hitler's final hours, recounted the act of committing suicide with Eva Braun. He supposedly took a cyanide pill and then shot himself on the 30th of April, 1945. As the Russians bombarded Berlin, a fragment of skull complete with bullet hole, which was taken from the bunker by the Russians and displayed in Moscow in 2000, appeared to settle the argument. That is until 2009, when it was genetically tested and shown to have belonged to a 40-year-old woman. So, guys, this is some crazy stuff here. Robert Sepper has gone into this stuff a lot. His channel is very awesome. I've seen a lot of his videos, and he's into the Indo-Aryan stuff. But last thing I wanted to touch on in this book was the Argentinian South American tie as well as the Antarctica tie with what I've been speaking about. On the next page, to most historians, the idea is preposterous, but the notion that Hitler had fled Europe did not seem preposterous at the time. Many Nazi officials found a warm welcome in Argentina, then led by Juan Perón, a dictator and admirer of Hitler. The Argentine government has still not declassified its files relating to Adolf Hitler, intensifying doubts regarding the official version of Hitler's death. If Hitler had committed suicide, then what could the Argentine files possibly contain that would be worth keeping secret 70 years later? And on the same page is a picture of Isabelita Perón, the third wife of Juan Perón and president of Argentina, in July of 1974, on the occasion of the funeral of her husband Juan, and she's giving a salute to the sun, good old-fashioned Nazi salute, and she is also a blonde-haired woman, looks very European, and that's that on that book. And it's thank you for that source, Robert, and I hope you're still doing what you're doing. So there was definitely a madness of the time. There was a huge revolution in thought and and progression of technology, tools, learning, and there was explosions in many parts of the world, and it looks like we didn't know how to deal with ourselves. Multiple falls of Atlantis, cycles repeat, and that's what I wanted to get into now with this Trump era and this whole political madness that seems to have been lasting forever. But I've said before, we're approaching the century anniversary of that World War II era, and it's kind of looking eerily close to, us being the Germany figure, where we're kind of like the superpower that seemed to stand alone in a sense, and our leader Trump being our enigmatic, savior, our avatar, our messianic figure for a lot of people. He's also the devil for a lot of other people, and so was Hitler. I hate to compare the two, but it just seems like a parallel with the energy behind having a leader with such force and oomph, and how he's able to speak to the public and sway the public. It's not as like shouty, and I mean it is, I guess, but it's not as like European shouty like Hitler was. So I guess the message in a nutshell, if there is one, is that we must tread carefully and keep our eyes open and not praise false idols. No siree, because they're going to dazzle us with a bunch of promises and get our blood pumping, and these are times of deception, and we got to cling to what our inner self tells us. We got to go within and find the answers there, and it's very hard to do, but that's what I've been trying to work on for some time now, and it has been paying off little by little. But I wanted to end this baby off with a little poem that I wrote, inspired by my readings of Hess, Jung, Serrano, and the influence they've had on me. The feeling is being at the edge of the end of the firmament. It is comparable to the bird fighting its way out of the egg in order to experience the true world or their true selves. Übermensch, Sonnenmensch, Nietzsche, Hess, Jung, Serrano, Schopenhauer, all the boys along the ladder of discovering their inner truth. Bless you, brothers, for I loyally feel like I have been touched by the torch, if you will allow, or if it is meant to be, rather. I hope to receive your teachings so that I know this is a far cry in the dark, but it provided a sense of catharsis for me to profess my soul serving in such a manner. A couple things I've experienced: the sensation while sleeping on some or sometimes meditating, a pressure in the third eye, and the feeling that all is right in front of me, and that all is right in front of my face, the expansive universe within, right on the edge, too scared to enter, like I don't quite belong or deserve it yet. What even is this? Reading Demian again created a new shade of perspective on things. Yet it was nostalgia and homecoming in a sense, but I can't go chasing waterfalls. One day I will feel the strength and confidence to break the egg when the time is right. I've already been in hell for a while, and I've set up camp. I've been watchful and vigilant, and it gets exhausting. It is a true warrior's path. I'm sorry to those I have hurt along the way, but this is war, ultimately a silent war. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. That's all we really can do, right? Stop trying to be loved and accepted by others. When the spark arrives, obey it. Much love. Stay tuned.